which is going to be about how to defend education. So backstory is this: we have a number of people out there going to school board meetings, running for school board, which is all this is good. They're fighting to stop critical race theory, and in essence, critical race theory boils down to the concept, I should say, that all that the basis of the United States, and this can be actually, you can connect this to the 1619 Project, which so recently put out this piece about the has 1619 Project talks about when slaves first got here to the United States. They were then turned in, that's when America really started, was when slaves landed in 1619 in Jamestown, which is complete false. It demonstrates just a changing. They're just deciding to cherry pick and look at history for what it is. They're ignoring all the thousands of years that slavery has existed in the entire world, and it has been picked out for certain groups have been forced into slavery. I mean, the Jews were forced into slavery because of who they were. I mean, the list goes on and on about the different parts of the history of the world that talks about slavery. Now, they say that America is really founded on slavery. It's a crock of crap, to be polite about it. It's a complete lie. It's all based off of what Howard Zinn and his lying through his teeth. And I have to say, John, that this is really a form of narcissism. When we look at the Howard Zinns I'm talking about specifically here, Howard Zinn wrote that book so that he could gain fame, and he did it. Of course.
Did you see the book where he's now credited being a communist spy?
Wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. But I mean, this most recently, the critical race theory has been based by a guy named Ibrahim Kendi, and his comments, his books that he's written. I want to pull a quote from him, from one of the things that he wrote, and if I can say. Let's see. The only remedy to racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination. The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination. And a lot of people just stop there. And they think that that's that's bad enough. But there's more to this quote from Kende. As President LBJ said in 1965, you do not take a person who for years has been hobbled by chains and liberate him, bring him up to the starting line of a race, and then say you are free to compete with all the others and still justly believe that you have been completely fair. As U.S. Supreme Court Justice Harry Blackmun wrote in 1978, in order to get beyond racism, we must first take account of race. There is no other way. And in order to treat some persons equally, we must treat them differently. So, in essence, this guy is trying to say that it's perfectly okay to be racist or to discriminate against others. And of course, discriminate means, in this case, because he specifically then goes on to talk about how white privilege and talking goes into more about how the system is skewed always towards white people, and that black people and minorities in general, but specifically black people, are pretty much screwed throughout the history of America. So I wanted to take a bit of a deep dive into this, brother, and say, okay, so this is what they want to teach in our schools. So let's teach this. All right. Let's go into this a little bit more. So how to defend education. I want to put that out there because it's not all about critical race theory. I know I just mentioned that about Kende, but it's not. There's also they're grooming our kids from pre-K to all the way up to 6th grade. They're grooming them to know about sex, to question their gender. Kids who are making decisions about what clothes they're wearing because their parents are still picking them out, are now making a decision on what gender they're going to be. So that's inexcusable, and making it even worse in many states. they are now moving towards not having to tell the parents that this child is questioning their gender, or this child has asked to have their name not to be called, if they're, Tom, not to be called Tom. They want to be called, another name that's a female name. So you look at it this way, is they're taking away parental rights. They are stripping away parental rights, and they're replacing, who are they replacing the parent with, brother? Government. So they always, and if you look at the Marxist ideology, that's what the Marxist ideology that's being put forward. And no matter where you look, they're always replacing the parent, and they're always replacing the person in charge with the government. Doesn't matter. They want the government to be in charge. And ladies and gentlemen, your school is a branch of the government. No matter how anybody tells you, they use tax money, and they pay their educators, their some cases board members. They pay all that stuff from tax dollars. They're an instrument of the government. That's why they have certain regulations they have to follow. So going on to the next one. So the components of destruction, and I got to go quick through this because I will spend a long time talking about it if I don't. They will, like I said, they want to replace the head of the family. There's never I want to point out, there's never been a promise of an equal outcome in American history, and that's really what critical race theory is talking about. Is talking about there needs to be an equal outcome, brother. So in other words, everybody has to win. Everyone has to be a winner, but we know that that's impossible. You can never have everybody as a winner. And so there truly has never been a promise of an equal outcome in the history of America. There's always been a requirement that there be equal opportunity, which is completely different. Everyone has the same chance. And if you go back to the 1800s and the early 1900s, you'll see an equal opportunity where an orphan was able to take his little rowboat and turn it into an international a cruise line, where you have people who start out with nothing, build themselves up into something. And if you look at if you actually, and I'm jumping ahead of my slides, but might as well dive into it now. If you look at the moments right after there's three key points in American history where black families grow, become wealthy, become entrepreneurial, and are actually very successful. There's three key points, and this is going to surprise you. The first is obvious. Right after about 10 years after emancipation and the 15th Amendment, you have a giant growth. Before Jim Crow comes in, they have a giant growth. They're doing well. There's a lot of strength and we have people that are black that are elected to Congress, to state houses, to local houses, to local towns. That's, it's big. It's big. It's bigly as President Trump was. And the second time is when we see during the 40s to the end of the 60s, brother, and we see where 80%, 87% of the population of black people are below the poverty line in the United States in 1940. 87% of everyone who's black is below the poverty line in 1940. In 1960, brother, that number is 47%. It's one of the greatest growths of American, economy that for any group, and the largest growth, 40%. It's cut in half. It's cut in half in 20 years. And of course, brother, the third biggest boom for the black families out there was under which president?
Are you saying something you want me to say? No, I'm just pretending that I broke it up. I'm pretending that it's broken up. So
I want you to. I asked who is under which president. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but I'm just pretending. I can't hear you.
All right. So under which president was there the largest growth of black? The largest economic growth for black families. Begins with a T. Trump. Trump, brother. Trump. It's the largest growth in the history of recorded information. We see the largest growth economically for black families under President Trump. So I wanted to point out that before, and where is the largest slump? Because now we ask where the biggest growth, the biggest economic booms. Where's the biggest dunce, like drop in the where things go in the toilet? When does that start, brother? When do you think it might start?
When a village idiot from Indonesia became president.
No, actually, when it was under LBJ, when they started the welfare program, because then they destroyed the families, and I'm way ahead of my slides here, but they destroyed the families. They destroyed. They took away. They encouraged black men to no longer be responsible for their children, and they replaced the parent with big government, and they took out these black families. That's why they have so many generational kids. And this is I have a quote from Colonel West, who said he remembers when during when he was a kid, that the parents were really the black parents were not just in the your nuclear family, but it was also the church family too. So they took that all got destroyed. I'm going to just go ahead get ahead of this, because I want to point out how to fight back. Let's go through. What is the truth? Here we go. School choice breaks up the power of unions. That's why they're not for this. If the parties did switch, and if the Democrats are the ones that are so viciously fighting to protect minorities, if they're supposedly so big for minorities, then why are they so against school choice? Because school choice breaks up the power of the unions. School choice takes the power of the government, out of the government hands, and parents have more power to influence schools, and then schools have to cater to families instead of demand of families. So here's some of the information I pointed out before. In 1963, 85% of black families had a man and a woman raising kids. The nuclear family is seen as Eurocentric, thus it is racist to the left. They see it as racist because it's Eurocentric. And having a strong father showed Colonel West how to be a man. It also showed him how to treat a woman. So this is some of the things that are lost when you take the father out of the home. This is something that's why you need to have two parents in many cases to raise kids. And I want to go back to this. How do we fight back? Because there's some interesting data on this right here, brother. If you look at this, schools, the education system in the United States is failing across the board, but it is definitely hurting the majority of the cities, and it's hurting the majority of the poor people. And where are those people? Again, most likely in the cities. We see 15% of taxi drivers have college educations in the United States today, as opposed to 1970 when 1% of taxi drivers. So in other words, they can't find work because their college graduation, what they learn in college is so useless that they can't find a job, and so they're forced to be taxi drivers. 60%, and this is where it gets to how we know that schools are failing our students, John. Look at these numbers. Remedial classes, you show up to college and they say, hey, you didn't pay, you don't have enough knowledge in math, science, reading, language arts to go and learn in our school. So consequently, you need to take a remedial class before you can even start your core classes. 60% of students going to community college have to take at least one remedial class. Look at these numbers, John. 50% of two-year colleges, 33% of four-year colleges, and 75% of all those students I just marked will not graduate college. So that means they're going to leave college with a debt that they can't pay, that they can't get a job to pay for. And 32 million Americans cannot read right now, John, that we know of. 32 million Americans. And of course, over half of the students that need to get remediation are black. And if you look we'll take the state of New Jersey, which is number one in the nation for education. It's ranked number 1, John. When I talked about this last week, 16% of the kids in some of these districts are the only ones who know how to read. They're graduating 87% of their kids in that school, but 16% of that class, you're lucky if they can read proficiently. Why? And all this has to do with we're not teaching mastery, we're teaching content. A lot of this we have to get through all of this in a year. It's a very simple thing, John. And I'm gonna deviate from everything here. I'm gonna go. There's only 5 ways for you to learn. When you get right down to it, there's only 5 ways you can get into the brain to teach somebody something. And that's the 5 senses. So if you are not accessing, and the best way is to get as many senses on board with the learning that's available. And some kids learn different ways. Some kids learn, they read, they get it. Some kids hear it, they get it. Some kids need to read and hear it to get it. Some kids need to have their hands on the product that they're working with in order to learn what it is they're talking about. And so, and when we look at this, there's been a lot of technical work done on this. And, a lot of people, a lot of good teachers out there are trying really hard to do it. But a lot of them are hampered because they're getting these political nonsense like critical race theory to teach, teaching the kids all the political stuff, the sex stuff, all the other things, instead of actually teaching math and science and the things they need to learn. They're teaching all the nonsense the politicians want. They're teaching them all that stuff instead of what they actually need to learn in order to be productive citizens in this and thus move forward with their life. There's a reason why Black families, Black kids are graduating unable to read. There's a reason why. And it's not because we have terrible teachers, although the teachers union is all for critical race theory, and they're all for punishing teachers that don't want to do it, which is wrong. And part of the problem with unions, that's part of the problem with unions, not teachers. And there are a fair number of teachers who think critical race theory is the end all be all. It's not that the teachers are bad. It's that what they're being forced to teach in many cases is bad. And John, I'm going to ask you this simple question. Here it is. Since I just told you that most of these districts, like Asbury Park in New Jersey, Newark, and Camden, since they're all in cities, and New York City is the same way, and Philadelphia is the same way, all these cities are the ones where the majority of these kids are failing. You have it in rural districts too, but you have 16% in the cities. You have 10% in the cities. You have less in the cities. Trenton, I think, is 3% for their math and science. Who's in charge of these districts? What political party is in charge of these districts ultimately? Did you hear me?
Hello?
Did I break? Can you hear me?
No,
I think we lost my brother. All right. So the answer is the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is the party that's in charge of the cities. And so when you teach critical race theory, you need to start talking about the actual truth of what it is. Who is responsible for the Black, the trouble that the Black communities are having? And you get right down to it. It's the same group of people that push welfare. It's the same group of people that destroy our cities. It's the same group. And this is what teachers should be teaching. This is what they should be teaching. They should be teaching where the failure is, because the failure is with the Democratic Party, the same party that was responsible for the KKK, the same party that was responsible for slavery, the same party that's responsible for the Civil War, the same party that's responsible for Jim Crow, the same party that's responsible for the birth of a Nation, that racist movie that is applauded by the left. John, they're the Democrats, those same ones that are demanding that we talk about critical race theory and blame white people. They're the ones who are the blame, not white people, the Democratic Party. And if you're going to teach, this is a message to all my fellow teachers out there. If you're going to teach them critical race theory, you better teach them the actual history. The majority of the people who voted for the Civil Rights Act, all the Civil Rights Act, were Republicans, not Democrats. The majority of the ones that supported the 13th, in fact, 100% of the vote for the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment, Republican, not Democrats, because they weren't even in Congress. But if they had been in Congress, they would have been voting to kill it, because that's what the Democrats did from then to today. And you can say that individual Democrats aren't the ones. I know Democrats that aren't racist, but you know what? It's not about racism. It's about control. And the Democrats have the majority of the people, the elites that want to control. There's a handful of Republicans like that too. But the majority of the people, the uniparty, is made up of mostly Democrats. And you'll see them in places like Biden. You'll see them in other groups. Brother, I think that's my time. I could go on, like I said.
So wait a minute, though. Basically, you're saying, though, the CRT is we should be for it, just making sure that it accurately reflects the real evil bastards who did it all, the Democrat Party.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying we should
We're for CRT.
Putting the truth. We should be putting out the truth, because if you talk about the truth, if you look at the truth, you're going to see where the problem is. You know, it's not a color of your skin that's the problem when it comes to the oppressors. It's political ideology.
So what's so great about America? What's so bad about the America? The Democrat Party. What's so great about America? If we get rid of the Democrats, we will be great.
I would say, John, the first question I would ask in the class is, which other country is better than the United States of America?
Where else are you going to get more freedom? Come from? Right.
Yeah. What other time in history would you go to live a freer life?
Why do you think you're so superior, church lady?